and previously before that I was in Western Australia. So I've seen, even in 6 years, a bit of a change to our shipwrecks. But coming over to the Great Barrier Reef, I know I don't have to tell you guys about, the beauty of it, the incredible region that it is, the corals, the marine life, tourism, industry, and more is everywhere across the Great Barrier Reef. But it is also an absolutely huge navigational hazard. And for millennia, vessels, ships, outriggers have wrecked and crashed into the reef, and of around about 900 possible shipwreck sites on the Great Barrier Reef. We've found 114 of them, historic ones, and of those we've only identified about 20 to 30%. So there's a lot of work to do, even in the wrecks that we have found. 50 years on from the Act, I think it's time to maybe expand our narratives a little bit when we talk about management and the futures of the reef. And I just wanted to start with one shipwreck example for this presentation. The rest I'll talk more about shipwrecks more broadly. But SS Yongala is one of the most iconic shipwrecks on the Great Barrier Reef. It wrecked in 1911, carrying 122 people, was on its way from Mackay to Townsville, and it took off, rounded the corner, the point, and Mackay got word of a cyclone coming full head on to Yongala. They spent weeks looking for the wreck after that, or looking for the vessel, and couldn't find it. And it wasn't until the 1950s that Underwater Explorers Club divers located it and identified it as Yongala. So many decades later. Culturally, it is incredibly significant. It is Australia's most intact and well-preserved shipwreck. That's absolutely incredible. It is a gravesite of 122 people. It has this combined historical, archaeological, cultural, social significance to Australia and to North Queensland and to Townsville. There are direct links there, as well as our other towns in the region. Environmentally, Yongala has become this incredible hotspot oasis reef in its own right. It sits between the mainland and the reef in a complete, seabed of sandy sea floor. And the marine life they're attracted to it, the fish, the turtles, sharks, everything is absolutely incredible, let alone its coral growth on the wreck itself. So it's become an artificial reef. The challenges facing Yongala are pretty extreme. It's in a cyclone-prone location, so there's repeated disturbance of this wreck to cyclones and any sort of swell and storm surge that comes in. And there's a conservation challenge where we have to balance the heritage and the significance of this site with ecological monitoring and with dive tourism pressure on it as well. That certainly has changed since the early 2000s, when we were first really looking at diving and commercially diving on Yongala continuously. But it's absolutely incredible, as you can see. Jumping forward a little bit into shipwrecks themselves, they're living archives of a hybrid mix. So they're human, they're cultural, and they're environmental. I don't ever want to say that they're just one or the other. They're a hybrid of both. And I think there's been a real undervaluation in reef management of shipwrecks, purely because that has mostly looked at science or marine life itself and never really put its lens towards heritage sites. And the impacts and degradation from climate change are increasing as far as we can tell. I think there are blind spots in the regulation, and this is mostly because the amount of boots on the ground or fins in the water has drastically reduced in the past couple of decades. So the sites, even our iconic ones, we rarely get to visit to monitor them and to really understand impacts like climate change on these shipwrecks. They are under threat. I think that's really a given, considering the status that a lot of coral on the reef is on, and perhaps other aspects as well. And I think it's significant to think about how they sit at this intersection of archaeological history, of cultural memory, of scientific or marine science research, and then a bit of climate change urgency wrapped into it, which I'll expand on in a little bit. Why do they matter now, though, in 2025 more than they have in the past few decades, particularly? And I think it's really essential here to say that historics are an irreplaceable resource. Once they have gone, we cannot replace them. We can't grow them somewhere and transfer them to the reef. We can't reenact a 1790 voyage with the same people, the same environment and conditions on it. That's it. Once that wreck has disappeared, we have no other chances to research it, to study it, and to understand the past. They are incredibly unique. They are time capsules of our past. So they hold stories about cross-cultural contact, seafaring, survival, colonization, and daily life at sea. Everything that is really essential to understanding who we were in the past and who we are becoming in the future. I believe they're under a bit of greater threat now than they have ever been before. And once they've gone, we've lost them. I do think climate change is an immediate threat. Rising sea temperatures, stronger cyclones, particularly for the reef itself, acidification, and even like loss of structure growing on these, like Yongala. If that's continually stripped of corals and growth, it actually impacts the site itself. We know from our conservation scientists that sea temperature rise and acidification has a massive negative effect on the longevity of aspects like wood underwater, but particularly steel and iron, like Yongala. It increases their degradation exponentially. And I think that this is an accelerating deterioration of this underwater heritage, mostly on the reef. We actually can't get out to these sites as regularly as we want to monitor them and to truly understand the data behind this deterioration. But we know from other sites monitored around Australia that those factors drastically impact how a shipwreck site survives on the water, in the reef and on the water. I think it's significant to talk about shipwrecks being so significant. They are like museums without walls. They're underwater museums, but they're rarely protected as such, purely because of the feasibility of getting there. In reality, they do sit out of sight, out of mind for most of the public. I reckon there's probably a bunch of you that have worked on reefs that have historic shipwrecks on it, and you may or may not have known about it, or not been interested to go and have a look at them. I think they're really managed like our museums are, and there's a risk that, we're losing them before we're even getting the chance to get out there and record them or to understand them and monitor them. More importantly, we're losing knowledge. Now, because I work in a museum, it's easy for me to make these comparisons, but our excavated collections like HMS Pandora, which sits at the Queensland Museum Tropics in Townsville, and you should go and have a look at it if you're visiting, is still yielding incredible insights today from work that we're doing on that material that was excavated 30, 40 years ago. I do think there is an over-reliance on in-situ preservation for underwater cultural heritage. I think that's missed research opportunities. I'm not saying we should go out and just dig up every shipwreck just because. There absolutely should be significant archaeological, theoretical underpinning behind it and questions we need to ask. But I believe that there's a future knowledge bank locked away in these shipwrecks that is slowly disappearing right now without us even getting the chance to understand it.
One more minute, Maddie.
Thank you. I think that climate change drastically impacts that one. Public engagement is incredibly critical, and I think it's something we need to come back to. We have the tools today to do all of this, and that's really, really important to understand shipwrecks, to get the public to respect and to appreciate them more as well. Now, I'm just going to skip the decade of ocean science because I touch on it here. What must we do now then? We must reignite public engagement. We've got to revive research into our collections and understand that excavation along in situ preservation is a brilliant thing. We need to strengthen our collaborations across marine science, climate research, biodiversity, ecology, working with our Indigenous and First Nations sea country partners as well, and rebuild professional capacity. A couple of decades ago, there were 3 times as many maritime archaeologists in Queensland, and now there's just a couple of us. And perhaps we missed a chance, but maybe even halfway through, we could harness the ocean decade or what's left of it. So it's a bit of an act now or lose them forever. They matter right now in 2025 because we're noticing this change and degradation. We don't want to lose our cultural memory and scientific knowledge and this opportunity for education for our next generations. So just to finish up, this is the next decade, or the next 50 years is the decisive time to record them and or protect them, or we sit back and we watch them disappear. Thank you.